And what AI can't do is draw upon experiences that it doesn't have loaded into its model, right? So, like going back to its people, its process, its technologies, industries, it's all of these different experiences that you as a human being can translate. The AI is going to be challenged with that, at least now. I mean, maybe in 20 years, we're going to be having a different conversation. But right now, that's your winning ticket to being an expert, to being a leader, to driving something forward that's not going to be easily replicated.
Welcome to Biotech Bites, where we speak with IT leaders from biotech and pharmaceutical industry about their thoughts and feelings around technology. I'm your host, Steve Swan. And today I've got the pleasure of speaking with Irina Dymarsky. Irina, welcome. How are you?
I am great, Steve. So happy to be here with you, and thanks for having me.
Well, welcome. Welcome to Biotech Bites. I'm really excited to chat with you. Like we were just kind of talking about, excited to chat with you about your experiences and especially your experiences around the commercial space and commercial technologies, right? Because I do see that a lot of chief commercial officers and a lot of companies that are getting closer to, commercial really need that help. And it seems that it's getting tougher and tougher for them to find it. So I'm really excited to chat with you about all this. So what I like to do when I first get going with folks is to just ask for a brief, rundown of how you got to where you are. Just give me a quick couple minutes on you.
Yeah, so Irina Dymarsky, I'm an executive technology leader. I love to simplify all the operational complexity that exists in companies today. I've had the pleasure of driving transformation and enabling innovation in multiple industries, pharmaceutical, services, technology. And I always center back to people, process, and technology. The alignment of those three is what's going to drive the meaningful change and the sustainable business impact. So we can talk about all the different tools that I have in my toolkit and how I collected them to be able to align that people, process, technology triad.
Why don't we use that as our springboard, right? To get right into it. I mean, I hear a lot of folks when I'm interviewing them over the years, been doing this 26 years, right? A lot of folks mention on their resume or they say people, process, and technology, but what does it mean to you? And what have you seen work, right? As far as people, process, and technologies concerned over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was so lucky early in my career. I was part of Johnson and Johnson's leadership development program, which is such a broad. You have such a broad ability to learn across their different areas. And at that point, Johnson Johnson had the commercial segment, the medical device, the pharma, and everyone in the program was required to get PMP certified and Six Sigma certified. So everyone coming out of that program got a green belt, got their PMP. And so that foundation for me has really been what I think I can always rely back on. So everything to me is a project. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's process or it's technology, it's a project, it's an initiative. You break it down. So the first thing you learn early on is who is it for? Why are we doing the thing that we're doing? And I feel like a lot of times people don't have that good why. And that right away puts them on the wrong path. And, you mentioned digital technology or digital transformation. You mentioned pharma. Now is the time where there's a lot of whys that are coming externally to the industry, truly. There's new regulations, there's disruption. A lot of those blockbuster drugs we saw in the 1990s and the early 2000s, they have impacted the large populations. And pharma is increasingly targeting rare disease, orphan indications, but that's not going to sustain for forever. So I really feel like we need to bring back the why. What are we trying to do? Is it that you're trying to simplify? Is it that you're trying to focus on a better customer journey? How are you engaging with who are your customers? Do you even know? Sometimes you have companies, they haven't defined who is their customer. Is it a B2B? Is it direct to consumer? So I think that why your charter is really important. That's kind of core, right, from the project management kind of institute type of deal. So no matter what, you start with your why. And then I often find, and it's a little bit silly, but especially with the blow up of AI, everyone comes in and they say, I need the technology. I went to a conference, I met with a vendor, I talked to Steve, my buddy, and they just did that, whatever at that other company. I need that. And so I've worked with a lot of business people who really understand their function. They did understand their why, and they would see something and maybe not quite understand all of the technology implications, but come to their business partner and say, I picked this thing and I need it. Well, that's where I think now the IT people really need to have that strong foundational understanding of how they're supporting. So the business partner role, I think, is really important in organizations. So you have your core infrastructure, you have your core data. Who is the technologist talking to your business people and who's translating? So that's when I say process. Do you understand the process? If you don't, that's okay. There's tools. So I reference Six Sigma. Let's map your process truly. Let's sit down and say, Steve fills out a form or an Excel, and then that Excel goes into a folder, and then a folder gets picked up by a system, etc. Right? You map the process. And then you look at the best technology to either automate it or improve it, or what steps can you cut out? Because in Six Sigma, you call it waste. So you produce if your process produces waste, that means it's not a good process. And my joke always is when you apply technology and when you automate a bad process, you produce waste faster. Right? You're not really, you haven't fixed the process. That's what I'm saying. It's always the why that's focused on the people. Your process is how does the entire end-to-end flow work? And only then do I lean into technology and say, now that we have the people aligned, everyone understands where we're headed, we're following the same map, we have the goal, that's the people, right? You're aligning the people to what you're doing. You've cleaned up your process. Then you say, what tool do you need? What system do you need? Or kind of automation, whatever the latest is. Then you apply it. And I think that combination of rigor of using all of these different tools is what leads to success, especially on these big, complex transformations.
You know what's funny is that as I'm listening to you, all these examples are running through my head in my life. I'm thinking about when I talk to folks, when I interview them, I think about how does that apply to everything we do, and I've got three examples that pop into my mind immediately as you're talking. I get calls from folks talking about, AI, right? And, I had one person call me and say, I need a leader in AI. And I said, I didn't say why, but that's kind of where my question went to. Well, I just feel like we need it because other people are doing it. FOMO, I said, I might not be your guy, because if you don't define it, right, why you need it and what's going on and what the drivers are. I always say the drivers, the motivations, right? If you don't really define the drivers around that and why you need that, then it's might not lead to success. And then that's going to be my fault somewhere down the road, pretty soon down the road, right? And I don't want to be involved with that, right? So, and it also, another one of the examples I think about my kids when they were young, when they were really young, I always asked why, listen, if you need, I don't know, make it up a cell phone. Let's talk about why. If one of your reasons is because anybody else has it, I saw it at a conference, AKA, right? I'm done. I'm hanging up on you. It's over, right? Let's talk about why you really need it, so it goes through. I mean, it should be common sense, right? Don't do technology for technology's sake. Do it for business sake, right?
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned AI. I mean, that's everywhere. That's the tagline. That's the buzzword. Everyone's talking about AI. I've been talking to peers across the industry. I've been going to webinars. And what it comes down to for me is, again, it's not just we are doing AI. It is, what is your digital strategy? And so I've actually heard from a lot of people that they're starting to take a step back and actually think, what is the digital strategy? And what are we going to apply AI to? Because there's you may think I'm doing AI, so that must be good. And that, I mean, it could be, but there's applying AI to making your operations leaner. So you can be applying to AI. So you had a person, you had Steve, and Steve was spending 3 hours each week moving files from one folder to another. Okay, great. So maybe that's not exactly what we think of AI, but there's some automation, right? Some process automation. You put some tools in there, and now these files are automatically moved based on some criteria. Okay, so you figured out why you want to apply it and in what specific use case you want to apply it. And then there's the use cases that are really forward thinking. Then you're starting to get into, I want to apply AI to my data. I want to train my own model. I want to create my own, maybe internal kind of chat GPT like model, which with my proprietary data that I don't want to feed out into the internet, particularly in pharma and biotech, right? You might have clinical information, you might have PII. Like, you don't want to apply AI incorrectly. So just because it sounds cool and people say, yeah, like, we're gonna, I mean, even something AI sounds very, very forward thinking, sounds very fancy. So let's take something even built in, right? A lot of the SaaS products now have AI built in. So you get an update, it loads, and so now in Microsoft you have Copilot, or now Salesforce is now advising you of the next best action. Your little Einstein guy, right? He's going to recommend something. Okay, but what data is it pulling? Are you appropriately using that data? I've been on a couple calls with ethics people, legal people. So just because you have this data on your network doesn't necessarily mean that you can start running it in algorithms or loading it into a system. Or if for a company like Syneos, they've run clinical trials for a number of different sponsors. So if Irina, am working on a Pfizer clinical trial and a Johnson & Johnson and a Daiichi Sankyo, that doesn't mean that I can just run Copilot all across my notes, because that data is really truly proprietary to that sponsor. So there's a lot of additional things that go into than just saying, oh, ChatGPT is the thing, I'm going to just do that. What is your digital strategy? And this is where you really need people who have the functional expertise. And I'm going to go back to, you need to connect it to what is the result that you're trying to get.
What are you really looking for? Because a lot of times what I'm hearing from the IT folks, throughout a bunch of my podcasts, they're not coming out and saying it. But what you're hearing, if you read between the lines, is that, some of the leaders, the COOs, the CEOs, whoever, or boards of directors are coming to them and saying, hey, I heard on the golf course a couple of days ago that someone's making money or really using AI. That's what we need to do. And so they get pressured into doing it, and they're building this cool, new, shiny object, like you just said, but they don't know the why, like you're talking about. Now, all of a sudden, they got this Ferrari they built, but is the data ready, right? The data is the fuel that goes into that Ferrari, and they're not ready for that. Or from a governance perspective, can we use all that data? I got the cool thing now.
Yes. And sometimes it's not about having the best technology or the latest technology. It's just applying it to the best, most impactful problem that you're trying to solve. And that's why, I'm just going to keep going back. It's the people, process, technology. So it's not the technology that is going to drive the change. It's, do you have the culture? Is your workforce ready? Are your employees embracing the new technology? Are they trained? Are you training them to use it?
What are your thoughts around that? How would Irina say the best way to get, because there's many, many, many schools of thought on this. Let's get we all agree, right? We got to get everybody ready for AI. How do we do that, right? Because I can tell you everything I've heard. I've heard it from A to Z, right? And everybody's got different things. Some people even bring in outside firms that help to train and show people, first they start with an external training partner that first and foremost gets everybody on the same program with terminology, right? Because if we're all speaking a different language, then it's not going to help us, and then they start going into, what what do we need to do? What are we going to do? So, how would you say, if you were an IT leader, right, inside an organization today, how would you start your team, your group, your crew, your organization on getting their feet wet with AI?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. A part of that answer has to do with how you originally hired all of the folks into your organization. So if you were hiring for a very specific skill set, let's say, you hired C++ programmers because that's all they wanted to know and that's all they wanted to do, you're probably not going to have the best capability. You're not going to have the best interest perhaps in AI. And again, I not to pick on C++ developers, but what I'm leading is continuous learning and a continuous upskilling, and then you really do want kind of a technically savvy workforce. So um, I'm going to say, including the companies that I dearly love, Pharma I think is a little bit behind in having a truly digitally savvy workforce. Obviously, they're behind tech companies because in tech, I worked for SAS. That's a tech company. Your IT people at SAS are not the most technical people oftentimes in the room because you have your R&D folks, they're building software. You have your salespeople, they're speaking software to the customers all the time, right? So it's completely different. In pharma and biotech, you have a lot of scientists, right? You have a lot of focus on different skills, different degrees, different education, and sometimes it's maybe some apprehension about the technology or not always understanding how it works. I'm actually going to make I'll make a case for regulatory compliance, which always, is like, oh, that's the thing that's holding us back. I think a part of regulatory compliance can actually be the stabilizing force to get people more comfortable with AI. Because if you can figure out a way to both say, I built this new technology and we've got it certified, it's CSV, we did all the documentation, we checked it and it's now compliant, I think that could help to build trust with people who kind of value that stability, that regulation, that understanding of what it took to make sure that it works correctly. So again, let me try to summarize what I'm saying here. Continue like interest in continually learning something new. I hope you've hired your people to be curious. So if that's one of the values in your company, that curiosity, you kind of want to try, you want to tinker. There's certainly change management applications to this. You pick those, that you always have the laggards, and then you have the people who are like, I'll wait to see when it's relevant to me. And then you have your early adopters, right? They're the ones coming and saying, oh, I want to try this. I want to put my data out here and I want to trial this, or I had downloaded something. So kind of leaning into that, finding those champions, making sure that you can bring back some values. Like if you can get some good results early on, right? Then that becomes your poster child. Hey, Steve really was curious. We worked with him. We implemented this small thing. We did it quickly. We piloted, not too much money, some investment, made sure it was compliant or made sure it worked in the context of our process. Who else wants to try it? You can do a little bit of like a grassroots, or you can crowdsource ideas. So at Cineas, we actually did some crowdsourcing of what processes to automate. So we just put a form out on the intranet and people can volunteer. Here's what I do day to day. Here are the systems that I interact with. And here's some opportunities that I see for applying some automation. Can you help me? And so you evaluate it and you pick the ones that are most valuable for the business. You get those champions. They're now walking around telling, wow, it's so great. I saved this many hours. My people are now freed up to think about different things. And you kind of build this, your book of stories, your book of success. And then you just keep rolling. And I think even eventually the people who were skeptical, if there's this overwhelming tide that's saying, well, it works, it's regulated, it's passed the audits, it's delivering customers, maybe success stories, I think you put effort into it. You don't just expect it to happen on its own.
Sure. Yeah, no, but there's, and I think earlier, you talked about some things before we were on camera. You talked about some things, that lead right into that were peripheral to what you were just saying, right? You had talked a lot about, cultivating the diverse experience, right? So, doing a lot of that kind of work. And I think all this feeds into it, right? Because like you said, different folks have a different threshold for different kinds of experiences, right? And you were just saying that with the AI.
I think so. I think that's true. I mean, a big thing for me personally um, is in my career to have purposefully sought out different experiences across multiple industries. And what I'm starting to see, the power of connecting the dots is really something that's helping me grow in my career. So, I ran the service desk for a couple years, many years ago at a company. Okay, I don't run the service desk anymore, but next time I'm talking to someone about their interaction with the service desk, an AI tool. Maybe it's a chat bot that's now going to be answering, right? We want to shift it. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. That's the foundation of IT. It's always going to be prevalent across the company. So you have that experience. You have an experience implementing an ERP. You have some data experience. You worked on a budget. You reached out to a customer. You did some marketing. The more experiences you can layer in, and the more diversity you have in your toolkit, I'm going to say, I think that's going to be the winning formula. I just finished a book. It's called Range by David Epstein, and he talks about the difference between, in music. I think in particular, there's this concept of 10,000 hours of doing something makes you an
Mhm.
expert. This book in particular, argues that AI is going to be the best at taking over those very siloed, specific expertise in one field, because you can train it to, play just the violin or play chess. Like that was another example that's throughout the book. You saw that early on when Gary Kasparov was beat by the first kind of, it wasn't even AI at that point, but it was a computer, because you load every possible permutation of the chessboard and the computer can process that faster. But what a computer can't do and what AI can't do is draw upon experiences that it doesn't have loaded into its model, right? So, like, going back to its people, its process, its technologies, industries, it's all of these different experiences that you as a human being can translate. The AI is going to be challenged with that, at least now. I mean, maybe in 20 years, we're going to be having a different conversation. But right now, that's your winning ticket to being, to being an expert, to being a leader, to driving something forward that's not going to be easily replicated.
Yeah, it can't reason. I mean, I have a nephew that's involved with AI, and his example is, you have three glasses on the table, right? One's a margarita glass, one's a, I don't know, plastic sippy cup, whatever. You push them all onto the ground, right? So it recognizes all three as glasses, right? As they're on the table. Push them onto the ground. Two of the three break. The two that break, it doesn't recognize. It doesn't know if that ever held water or not. The sippy cup that didn't break, that's still a cup to it, right? So it can't reason. It can't figure that out. It also, what you were just saying, reminds me of, I've paid a lot of attention to Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger over the years, right? And Charlie Munger, I used to go to the shareholder meetings, and Charlie was great. Charlie just bottom lined everything. But Charlie felt that the school system, university system, was doing us all a disservice because it was teaching us this. It wasn't teaching us this. He's like, the schools need to give you an overview. Let's connect, the sciences, the humanities, the English, whatever. Connect them all, and then we'll be able to, like you just said, get a full view of everything and really be able to. That's what makes us human. Really be able to figure things out.
Yeah, I've been connecting with some students from my alma mater, Drexel University, and most of them are graduating, and they're saying, Irina, what do you think? Like, should I just go into this area or this area? And you can never say for a person. They really have to find the right opportunity that makes them tick. But I have been cautioning, and this book mentioned it. Don't specialize too early in your career, because back to my C++ example, because that thing that you have specialized in is going to change. It just is. It's just year after year, things are going to change and there's going to be something new. So you don't want to go too deep on one thing. Now, if that one thing is kind of emotional intelligence, or it's people, or it's change management, okay, that's applicable, right? That's broad, but that's a broad discipline. But when I'm talking about technology or kind of a certain area, specifically in IT, it's changing too rapidly. Don't get locked in to just that one thing. Really think broadly, and I think that will open up new opportunities.
Well, again, I'm going back to Charlie. Sorry about that. And he may have stolen this from Ben Franklin. To the person that only owns a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, right? So that's what we're talking about. Let's get diversity, right? Diversity of experience and diversity of background, right? Not only for the individual, but for the group too, right? That'll help in decision making processes. Now, another thing that we talked about early on when we were off camera was digital, right? Digital transformations and such. You touched on that a little bit ago. And I know that being on the commercial side and working who you worked for, you've probably been involved at different levels with many different, digital transformations. I guess first define what you mean or have seen as digital transformation, right? And then explain, why that's so big and why that's so important for all of us in pharma and
Yeah.
biotech.
Yeah, and I'm that's a great question, Steve. And I'm sure that everyone is going to have their own definition. And maybe people will watch this podcast and say, "Well, that Irina doesn't know what it is." But to me, in my experience, digital transformation isn't just about adding new software. Like, let me just say that again. It's not adding new software. It is fundamentally rethinking your workflows, your processes, your interactions. It's leveraging data in a smarter way, in a completely different way. It's making sure your decisions are data driven now, based off of, is it the right report? And I'll give you an example with ChatGPT and how you have to be careful about making decisions off data if you don't trust it. And, again, for pharma, most importantly, it's staying compliant and patient centric. So digital transformation could be all of those things on the basis of data and technology, but it's fundamentally impacting your workflows. And my funny story about ChatGPT, I asked it to, write me, I was researching some things, and it said, a recent study found that 20% X, Y, and Z. And I wrote back immediately and I said, cite the source of the 20%. You would not believe it. So ChatGPT replied to me, on further research, I was not able to find a citation for this number, and then whatever, but it's like commonly known something, something. So it basically immediately backed away and was like, oh, there's actually no 20% study that found this. It just made it up.
Total hallucination.
Right. And so I was like, okay, well, then rewrite this paragraph without citing this percent. So, I mean, you're going to see this with AI, but you actually may be seeing this already without AI, right? How many times have you gotten an Excel file and you look at a number, maybe it's a financial calculation, maybe it's a sales number, just the number looks off. Right. So don't forget about, you are a human being with a brain. Again, going back to that range, if the number looks off, like just doesn't feel right, and you have been working with this data for even a month, a year, 10 years, how many times have I asked, what is this number? Like, it doesn't make sense. Oh, that's a typo. Oh, that, it's missing a zero. Oh, this one was multiplied to be in millions and this is in thousands. Like, all of those reasons are true and they exist in organizations big or small. So digital transformation to me is having trust in your data. Again, building those workflows, developing the questions in your workforce. Like, don't be afraid. Build that culture of questioning the ChatGPT. Don't assume that if it says 20%, a recent study. What study? Oh, I can't find one. I made it up. Basically, that was like ChatGPT saying, I think I just made that up. So that I don't know. What do you think? Does that resonate with you about what digital transformation is?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think, like you just said, at the core of it, right, is trusting your data. And at the core of it, if you have bogus data, right, I mean, doesn't matter what else you're doing, it's not going to work, It's not going to work.
Yeah, so it's a catalyst. Your technology can be a catalyst for sure. But to really have this long-term vision, your long-term value, you need all of that support around it. And I've been seeing a lot of, I mean, you're in the recruiting field. Are you hearing about a lot of people kind of going back to the basics? I think people are now talking about, I don't have a good ERP, or maybe I have an old ERP. I really need to update it. I don't have a good handle on my financials. I don't have a CRM. I've been kind of doing it. We grew so fast, we didn't have a chance. So again, it doesn't have to be any of these big names that I'm sure we can all rattle off. But you do need to get those processes right. Like, how are you doing your financials? How are you measuring your customer relationships? Are you serving your customers from like a NPS perspective, like a net promoter score? Are they happy with the service you're providing? Would they recommend you to a friend, or a colleague? Kind of get back to the basics. And if you don't have an MDM, again, or MDM like program where you trust and you can trace through that like ETL, that extract, transform, and load on your data. I mean, again, maybe it's outdated, that terminology, because now we're in like data lakes and it's not a data where, whatever. Do you trust your data? Can you trace it? Can you prove your decisions to be accurate? That to me is digital transformation. I think we've kind of have like a 50-50 going on. There's some companies that need to go back and kind of clean up their foundations before they're able to go further. And there's others who have certainly made that investment and now it's paying off because they're able to now leapfrog to the new.
And to your point, going back to the basics is about getting that data right so that you can use it going forward, right? So I do have companies, and some of the folks have been on my podcast who have, and they've talked about it, right? I'm just going to make this up, from 2015 forward, all their data is great. Love it. Before that, we got 20 years worth of data we're trying to get through. We're never going to get through it, So, were the systems right? Were the processes right? Was the tracking of the data right? Have we changed the way we track it? I don't know. They don't know. So now we've got different kinds of data, or different, maybe it's measuring something. Who knows, right? So is it useless? No, but they still got to get through it. And then one of the folks I made a comment to, why can't you go out and buy the data, for this, whatever you need here? They said, we still can't trust. We still got to go through it. I said, okay, all right. So, it's about getting all that data together. And like you said, having master data management and so on and so forth. I see a lot of that lately. Data is king right now, and everybody's trying to figure out how to harness their data, keep their data, secure, right, and then utilize it to their advantage. And there's a lot of it. We got a lot of data in all those systems: the CRM system, the ERP system, your procurement system. I mean, everything. And it all feeds together. And they're all good at doing this, but like you said, we got to go across now. And what does this mean when this happens? What's it going to do to this over here, and so on and so forth, right? So got a lot of moving parts in pharma. Yeah. So, well, good. Well, I appreciate that. Anything else you think we should be thinking about as far as technology, people, process, data because I always ask one last question of folks and it's always off topic. So before we get to that, I want to ask you if there's anything else we want to cover.
Well, I think I'll just wrap it up. We talk about implementations, big technology implementations. And again, maybe this is me being a little chat GPT, but you do hear these double-digit % of failure. Like these ERP implementations go off the rails. We overspend. We don't deliver to scope. I truly believe that it fails not because the solution is flawed. It's because we didn't address some of the additional elements. So they could be human or process elements. Like if you forgot it, you kind of missed it in your due diligence, and you just tried to layer the technology on. I think that's where a lot of the failure happens. So the real magic, and I'm all about let's make magic together. But the real magic happens when you align those, the people, process, technology in a single strategic vision That starts with, we talked about the why. That's the building of the roadmap, right? What is your roadmap? It's your if you want to lean in digital, it's your digital roadmap. So you can have a business strategy, you can have a digital roadmap. You're prioritizing the high impact areas first, and you're going to sequence it so that you get these early wins, and they're going to fuel that excitement. They may fund some of the investment. And then you're moving on to the more ambitious efforts after you've gotten your feet wet. You're communicating and you're training, because without it, your people are not going to be able to support this new thing. You're going to create these champions. You're going to use multiple channels of communication. You have to say something 7 times for people to remember it. Now that's I can find you that's a citation. And you're celebrating the early wins, right? You're going to share these success stories. You're going to speak on podcasts. You're going to maybe publish something. You're going to work with your vendors, right? You're going to promote each other. And then that, I think, is the transformation that we're going to see in pharma and even other industries. You're going to see the human factors coming together. You're going to see the transparency, the communication, and we're going to be celebrating this progress over time.
Again, I'm going to reiterate. I'm almost saying exactly what you just said. I think any process, whether we're switching jobs, right? Whether you're talking to Steve Swan about a career opportunity, whether you're putting in a new ERP system, whether you're changing your data or your data source or curating your data in one way or another, understanding the why, the foundation of the drive. I always call them drivers, motivation. Mm-hmm. What's the why behind this? When I talk to somebody about a position, I need to understand their why, what's driving them. And then I'm always talking to companies to understand what their why is, what their drivers are. If I'm not matching those up, it's not the right way to go, right? It's the same thing as being in a company. What's the why behind this? If we don't understand where we're trying to go and how we're going to get there, it's game over. So
I agree.
That's where I am on that. So and I spend a lot of time talking to folks and individuals and companies about their drivers and the why, because if I don't have that why on the foundation, again, just like you're talking about, the rest of the house that we're building is on a shaky foundation, for lack of a better term. So, well, thank you. So I do have one final question I ask folks, okay? And I like music, right? So just today I bought some tickets to a concert I'm going to in a few months. But so we go to different concerts and different shows and things like that, my wife and I. And so what I always like asking folks, is there any one particular live music show or act or band that you've ever? That's the reaction I get from almost everybody. They start laughing, they giggle, and they're like, okay, what should I be saying? Don't think about what you should be saying. Think about what you really, truly. And if you're not a live music person, that's fine too. I totally get that. Some people are scared of crowds, right? Or what have you. So, but I like asking folks that. It shows a more personal side of the individuals as we're speaking to them. So anything that comes to mind throughout your entire life that you would say that was the best show or act or whatever that I'd ever seen.
Yeah. I have a perfect story for you. So 2 years ago, is it 2? Yeah, 2 years ago for the holidays, my husband says, I got you a gift. I got us a gift. And I'm like, okay, what is the gift? So he goes, I got us 2 tickets to see Scooter. Okay. So I'm like, okay, this is really cool. Like I like Scooter. It's kind of like electronic. I think it's called like happy hardcore is like the type of music that he created. A lot of electronic music, a couple words, a lot of effects, fire and then,
like
again, maybe
EDM kind of stuff, right?
It is. Yeah. So happy hardcore is literally the music that Scooter is like the father of. So I'm like, okay, this is great because we listened to this when we were in college. There's lots of that we love about it. So I'm like, okay, great. Where is the concert? He goes, it's in Germany. Okay. Yeah. So I'm glad that was basically my reaction too. So on the holidays, he's like, I got us these tickets. So I'm like, okay, so right away, I told you I'm like this PMP kind of brain. So I'm like, did you plan? Did you buy tickets? And he goes, oh, no, you can do all that. You do that because I love to do this. I do that for my family. I'm always planning the vacations. I'm always, doing all the research and doing like on this day we have this agenda. So anyway, but I loved it. We went. It was a trip that my husband and I took. We don't take too many of them because we have young kids, but it was a trip that we took. It was April, April of last year. We went to Germany. We saw this concert. It was unbelievable,
Awesome.
unreal, so good. Um, like just amazing. And yeah, we loved it. We had a great time. But yes, he was like, I got you the tickets. You do the
Right. Yeah.
rest.
I'm the idea guy. I'm done now. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And to translate that, you need those people in company. So, sorry, I'm just gonna kind of wrap it all up. You need those idea guys or gals who are gonna say, "Oh, we're going there. Like we are going to Germany, or whatever. We're going to that customer. We're going to go to that product, or we're going to do that. And then you also need the rest of the folks who are going to make that real. So truly, when we talked about getting your workforce ready, recognize the strengths. And so, yeah, in our family, it's definitely my husband's the idea guy. And I'm more like, how do we operationally and compliance regulated make this work and make it real?
And think about it. You being the boss at home, right? I mean, if he put it together, because I know I would have done that probably the exact same thing. If I put it together, I'd be like, well, why'd you pick that hotel, or why are we flying in and out of here? We could fly earlier that day. We don't have to fly at that, whatever. Okay, I got it. So anyway,
Yeah.
I would have done.
So if you don't know Scooter, you should check it out.
I will. Yeah. No, I've my two daughters are in big time into EDM and such, and they go and see those shows all the time. One of them's in the city, New York City, and she goes to see a lot of that stuff. And I think my girls went to they went to something in Spain a couple of years ago. They took 2 weeks and they traveled to Spain, and I remember seeing pictures from some EDM show they went to, and I think they're off to Tokyo this year. They're going. So anyway. Well, cool. Well, thank you very much. That was great. I'm glad you joined me on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to see it all come together, and let's continue the conversation.